Hello, Carl Rominger here with Weekend Appointment, the show where I answer your legal questions. I'm joined by Vinny Manfredo. We're going to be talking about 1983 actions, which is basically use of force. Well, it includes a lot of other things too, but in this context, use of force, suing police officers or other actors who do an unreasonable seizure of the human body or otherwise abuse you in an actionable way. And Vinny and I are going to talk about that. Of course, in the meantime, I always want to remind you, go to weekendappointment.com. You post your question there and get it answered. The lawyers in the office, myself, Vinny, Drew, Eric, Robert, there's five of us running around in there by last count. We're always looking there to answer questions for folks. And, of course, you can get our contact information so you can get an attorney throughout the week. And everybody in the office is happy to serve you. We've got a crack staff of folks working underneath us to help us out. And, Vinny, why are you smiling? Well, he's smiling. I see him smiling. Yeah, they're cracked. They're cracked. I mean, a cracked staff. Now our staff, they're all good people. Anyhow, in all seriousness, by the way, the office number is 717-241-6070 in case you need to get through for some reason. Of course, probably if you're listening to this show, you're not going to get anybody in the office immediately, but leave us a message and we will get back to you. So, Vinny, I wanted to talk to you about this use of force stuff. Tell me what it is.
Well, use of force, I mean, basically when you're arrested, the police can't use any type of force. They have to use a reasonable amount of force to arrest you. That's the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. You have the right to be free from an unreasonable seizure.
I seem to remember, and I'm just going back in my mind to law school, criminal procedure, and talking about Fourth Amendment issues and search and seizure. And I do remember like one of the cases that we read about had to do with shooting a kid climbing a fence in the back of the head as he was fleeing or something. And the court said that was an illegal seizure because it was the ultimate seizure, I guess, but that it wasn't justified simply to shoot a fleeing suspect in the back of the head.
Yeah, I mean, what was the threat there that he posed? I mean, I know he's fleeing from the police, but does he pose a threat to other people or the police? They probably did not have to shoot him in that case.
And I suspect then if he, on the other hand, was climbing the fence towards a playground carrying a semi-automatic weapon in his hand, the analysis would be different. And
then it's much different. Then you're weighing his right against the government's right, and the government protecting people there.
And I think a lot of people, are going to say, well, you guys are going to be hard in cracking down on police officers. But what I think you're saying is that the law here doesn't say you can't do your job. It mandates just that you do your job within a certain parameter.
Exactly. And that parameter is reasonableness.
And if I'm a police officer, let me ask it this way. So I'm a police officer, I get my training and I go out on the street. How do I know I'm being reasonable? Am I taught this? How does that work?
I think that's something you're taught by your police force through all your training. That's something that you should be taught, and if not, then that police force is not doing their job.
And there's something out there I've heard called force escalation, which is some idea of if you get the taser out, you might do that in a different situation than when you would get the gun out, which is different than when you might just grab the suspect by the hand or something.
Yeah, and that goes back to whether or not they're a threat and how much it's how much force you need to arrest them, and you have to weigh that force with what threat they are to the public, to the officer themselves.
Okay, and so I guess to be fair, I don't want somebody to say, "Oh, you guys are anti-police." In other words, we're not. What we're just trying to say is, just like I, as an attorney, or you as an attorney, are expected to use reasonable care when you prepare a client's file or prepare a brief or draft a document. And I guess, when somebody comes in and says, I want to hire you, a reasonably prudent attorney might say, there's nothing I can do to help you, therefore I can't take your money. Whereas a shyster would say, just give me money and we'll see what the judge does, and then blame it on the judge. And that's probably somebody who could be sued for malpractice.
Exactly. And I mean, these are pretty rare situations. I mean, they happen, but we're not here to say that, they're happening all the time, that police officers are bad people, they're looking to hurt people when they arrest them. That's not the case here. There's just a small percentage of these cases where a police officer makes a mistake, or maybe they are just a bad officer. They're not trained properly, or they have bad intentions.
And I know that you and I were involved in a case one time with it was one officer who had three separate claims by three separate people in three separate incidences. And that's kind of like when you start to go, wait a minute, three people can't all have these kinds of very bad experiences without knowing each other, without any contact with one another. It sort of lends some credibility to the situation. On the other hand, though, I know a lot of people seem to think that they were manhandled or unfairly treated by the police, but that may simply be because they don't realize that their level of intoxication or belligerence may have reasonably required the officer to escalate the amount of force.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that one case we had together, that was clearly a cop that was just out of control. I mean, and he needed to be stopped somehow because he just kept doing it over and over. And not every case is like that.
In fact, I would imagine that more often than not, the situation might be rather an unusual event for a particular officer. In other words, if somebody does commit a unreasonable search and seizure or unreasonable seizure of the body, it's probably not going to be routine. It's going to be something that, they misapprehended something that they should have seen differently, or they I don't know, they were in a completely bad state of mind for some other reason, or...
Yeah, it could just be a bad day for that officer. He might be pissed off. You might have pissed him off, and he might have used too much force than necessary based on the emotions he's feeling that day.
And I guess that's part of the issue, too. And I would imagine, however, if an officer does use too much force, but there's something in the case that tends to show us that the person who is complaining of it did something to bring that upon themselves, that's something that a jury's going to key in on if there's ever a lawsuit.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you aggravate the situation, the jury's going to see that, and, they're not going to just look at what the cop did. They're going to look at your actions and see what type of problem you caused. Were you fleeing? Were you resisting arrest? Did you appear to be a threat?
Right. Okay. What else? What kinds of verdicts? I mean, if somebody puts the handcuffs on too tight, I assume it's not worth $1 million.
No, and I think you've handled some cases like that, and you've settled them. I think a lot of those cases you try to settle before you go to court because, you could get a jury who says, who cares? The cuffs are on there too tight. So smaller verdict probably in those cases because not much physical or, medical damages there. When
you've gone out and looked at different cases that are out there and surveyed kind of the landscape, do you have some examples of different cases and what the verdict amounts were?
Yeah, I mean, and for these verdict amounts, the more pain you're in, the more medical attention you needed, the higher the verdict's going to be. So we have a case where, a guy was just thrown on the ground, hit a few times. That was about $100,000 verdict. Another guy, same thing, punched a few times, around $100,000. The one that raised it up was this one guy cracked rib, displaced vertebrae, trauma to his head. That was $800,000.
Now, in a use of force case, you've got different kinds of damages, as I understand it. And one type of damage is the actual physical harm to you. So your medical bills, pain and suffering are applicable, just like in a car accident.
Exactly, and then you have punitive damages maybe. That's where you're kind of the jury's going to give an award to try to prevent this behavior from happening in the future. You have to show some sort of recklessness in that case.
And then also you've kind of mentioned to me before that the right itself has some value, meaning not just the loss of the medical damage, but the very fact that your right was violated, the jury can assign some value to.
Yeah, I mean, if you're arrested falsely and you spend even a day in jail, how do you put a monetary amount on that? That's pretty hard to do. So that's something your lawyer has to somehow convey to the jury that this is worth something. He spent a day, he spent 10 days, 20 days in jail for something he didn't do.
Right.
And you might look at some other things there, maybe you lost work, maybe you were fired over it, so lost wages.
And I would imagine that there could be a lot of collateral consequences in the employment arena to a charge, for instance, that was false or not applicable, or just the fact that you were locked down for a few days. Some employers just aren't going to tolerate it.
Definitely. It's not only your employment, but then there's damage to your reputation, so you can collect an award for that too.
Okay. Interesting. We're going to come back after the break here and talk some more with Vinny about these things. I think I'm also going to see about talking about some short sales as well, which is a completely unrelated topic, but we'll get to that later in the show. In the meantime, go to weekendappointment.com. You can find our free will kit there. You can download it, get a free will. You send it in. You get to meet with a real live lawyer. We write your will for you. It's not a gimmick, so just go to weekendappointment.com. You can also get our contact information if you want to hire any of us in the office. I'll see you after the break. Hey, welcome back. This is Weekend Appointment with attorney Carl Rominger. I'm joined in studio by Vinny Manfredo. Vinny's one of the lawyers in my office. Vinny's kind of one of the senior guys and someone, if you call in, you should really trust. If you need to get hold of us, by the way, go to weekendappointment.com. You get our contact information. You check out that free will kit. And I know I'm going to drive you crazy by mentioning that, but if you don't have a will, you're really letting your family down because they need to know what you planned for the future. They need to know what you were thinking. And while you're getting your will, you should make sure you have a living will as well so that there's not a big fight over what mom or dad really wanted or what your true intentions were when it came to your advanced medical care. And while you should also think about getting a power of attorney as well. These are all things that I can help you with. So if you go download that free will kit at weekendappointment.com, we'll help you with it. Other thing I want to just remind you guys, if you are pulled over by the police, you know, you're going to need to think about what to do. So I've put a video up there on weekendappointment.com that you can listen to a law professor on. You can see a police video where I'm actually stopped on the side of the road, and you can see how that goes down. There's no right answer. There's no exact right answer as to what to do when you're stopped by the police because it has to be decided on a case-by-case basis. For instance, do you give the breath test in a DUI? Well, the usual answer is yes. But do we mean the official breath test or the portable breath test? And when would you refuse and why? And how much information would you give the police? These are all things you have to think about, and we'll do on other shows. I just want to keep you thinking and keep you checking things out. So go to weekendappointment.com and check those videos out as well. They're posted right there on the front. You just scroll down, you'll find them. And they're very edifying, particularly the one where the law professor speaks at length about how it really works. And I think they bring a live police officer on that video, too, to basically tell you why he does what he does and how come most people fall for it. That said, I mean, they have a job to do, and remember that. Police officers have the job of arresting you. They're not out there to clear everybody. In fact, I can't prove this, but I suspect that if I were a police officer and I never arrested anybody, I'd lose my job. So while we're talking about arrests, sometimes excessive force is used in an arrest, and we were talking in the last segment, Vinny, about that being a Fourth Amendment seizure of the person. Are there other claims that a person could bring under 1983 or they might want to talk to you about?
Yeah, pretty much any other constitutional right you have. If you're deprived of it by someone acting under color of state law, then you have a claim. I mean, you're looking at things like the First Amendment. Maybe you were arrested for protesting when you had a right to. Maybe you're denied a permit to march. Those are First Amendment claims that you can bring under this 1983. Then for prisoners, there's the Eighth Amendment claims of you have a right to be free from cruel and unusual punishment. So if you don't receive medical attention in prison or you're assaulted by your inmates, assaulted by guards, that's an Eighth Amendment claim you could bring under 1983.
And I guess, you know, some people, those prisoners, who cares about those prisoners? They should be locked up and without a key and thrown away. But I think one of the hallmarks of our society is that we're not Iran, we're not some third world nation who just throws people in a prison somewhere and locks them up and lets the prison take care of itself, like on that old Fox series, Prison Break, where they had to keep getting back into prison so they could keep breaking out of prison again for some reason. You know, because that's what happens when you name the show something and then you accomplish it. You have to come up with a reason to go back. Little side note there, but in all seriousness, we do have a standard of care in prisons, and prisoners are entitled to be treated with at least basic. I'm not saying they have to be coddled. You know, I'm not saying that Sheriff Aparo or Payo or whatever his name is out there in Florida or Arizona, I guess it is, can't throw him in a tent and feed him sandwiches and make him wear pink jumpsuits. But he, you know, maybe that's not cruel and unusual. But what you're talking about is actual, like a prisoner has an infection and he doesn't get medical treatment at all, or there's a threat out that some gang wants to kill a guy and the guards intentionally let the guy in the break room with the people who want to kill him.
Those are common examples. I mean, if you have an infection, you have a right to get medical care. If you tell the guards you think someone's going to kill you or try to kill you and they don't do anything about it, you keep making these complaints and they put you in the same cell or same area as this guy or this gang that you know that you've been complaining about, and there's a threat made on your life or you're almost killed. I mean, they should be responsible for that. You have a right to be somewhat protected from that.
Right. So those are the different aspects. Now, if someone wanted to see you, like, what are the steps to doing a case like this?
Well, in most of these cases, there's a 2-year statute of limitations. So if we're just looking at excessive force, if a client comes to see me, we're going to talk about what happened to them from their point of view. Are there other witnesses I can talk to?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes the client, like we've talked about earlier, they might have been intoxicated. I mean, this is a case where they're getting arrested, so they may have been doing something illegal. They may be intoxicated. They might not be your best witness. You want to find someone else who could have witnessed this event. Was there a video of what happened? So we talk about all the facts surrounding it. We evaluate the situation, see what type of medical bills they had, what type of damages, and then we go from there. Like I said, we have 2 years to bring a lawsuit. We usually try not to wait the 2 years, though.
And my understanding is, do you have to give like a 6-month notice sometimes in these cases?
Yeah, we give a 6-month notice as required by law whenever you're going to sue the government. So that's something you need to, if you feel you've been abused or excessive force was used, you want to act on it quickly.
So what I'm reading then or into this is, if somebody comes into you and it's been a year and a half and they really think they were wronged, there's a chance that the right notices might not have been given, even though the statute of limitations hasn't passed. Certain prerequisites may not have been given out that would have apprised the potential defendants of it, and they could use that as a defense.
That's true, and if it's a good case other than notice, I mean, I still would try to pursue it, because I think I haven't had to try to I haven't came across it yet, but I think there's a way to maybe get around the notice.
In my mind, I remember something about the fact that if there's actual notice, in other words, if the chief of police had already investigated the incident because of a complaint about it or something, that the fact that you didn't send them the formal notice letter, they might have actual knowledge of it.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. I think there are ways to get around it.
So if somebody's got a claim that they haven't given notice within 6 months, but it's been less than the 2-year statute of limitations, they should probably get in and see an attorney like you before they lose their right to claim it. And if it's been less than 6 months, they definitely need to get in to see an attorney so that they can figure out what they need to do to make sure that there's no notice issues.
Definitely. And if that's the case, I would send out notice right away and maybe state why they've been on notice.
Gotcha. And I assume the very fact that you send out notice doesn't necessarily mean the case is going to progress any farther than that, but that's going to protect the person's time limits and their ability to bring the case if you're able to develop one.
Exactly. I'd still look into the case and see if we have a good claim to bring.
And I assume if a further investigation goes forward, there's going to be times, and have been times, when you've told clients, I just can't forward this any longer because there's just not enough here.
Definitely. There's definitely times where, you can't help the client. It's either not a good claim, or there's just not enough damages maybe, or there's no damage. So it's going to be a difficult claim to bring, and it's just going to be a waste of everybody's time, money, their expenses.
So contrary to popular belief, lawyers don't just bring any claim that rolls in their door. There's a whole vetting process that goes on.
Yeah, you can't just bring any claim. You can't bring a frivolous claim or something that doesn't have merit.
And if I wanted to bring a claim like this, is there anything I should be doing in the meantime? Should I be documenting my damages, or what should I be doing?
I would make sure you know what happened that day. Find your witnesses. If there are some, keep in contact with them. If you think there's a videotape somewhere, get a hold of that. Keep seeing your doctor if you have damages, and provide those medical records to your attorney.
Well, I know you and I are involved in a case that has a great video, but I'm under kind of a quasi-gag order, so I'm not allowed to talk about it.
That's right.
So hopefully when that ends someday, we'll post the video on Weekend Appointment so people can see it. So if you're hearing the show and it's not live, check out Weekend Appointment, see if we've got it live yet or not. But someday, Vinny, you and I can come back and talk about that one and take that video apart piece by piece to show people what an ideal claim for excessive force looks like.
Yeah, I can't wait till we can post that.
Listen, guys, you're listening here to Carl Rominger and Vinny Manfredo. The show's Weekend Appointment. You go to weekendappointment.com, check out the videos we talked about. You can also sign up for that free will, and you can get our office number and contact us about hiring us. Whatever you need. Vinny practices in a lot of areas of the law, as do I. We've got 5 attorneys total. We've got a crack staff to help you, and we're gonna do what we can. We also have offices in Chambersburg, Carlisle, Lancaster, and we can meet with you in Harrisburg as well. So don't hesitate. If you're anywhere in the mid-state, you can hear this signal. We definitely service your area. All right, we'll be back. Hi, Carl Rominger here. This is Weekend Appointment, the show where I answer your legal questions. Don't forget to check us out at weekendappointment.com. And I'm joined by Paul Chase. Paul, are you here?
I'm here, Carl.
Paul, you are a person who often helps people with what are called short sales.
I do short sales. My primary focus is my larger focus is to stop foreclosures.
Okay.
Short sales are a part of that, but if we can stop the foreclosures and actually even help somebody stay in their house, so much the better.
And you're a realtor down in offices at Caldwell Banker. Which one is that?
My main office is in Lancaster at 1000 North Prince Street, but we have offices about 5 different counties all over South Central PA, so we're pretty much all over the place.
Gotcha. So basically, if you can hear this signal, Paul can probably help you. And I'm just going to jump this right out front here, Paul, because maybe people aren't going to write it down yet because they're not impressed yet, but they're going to be in a minute. So what's the phone number they should call to get you?
I can be reached at 717-735-8400.
Gotcha. And I just want to let people know I did post you as a friend of the show with some contact information on weekendappointment.com. So if you didn't get that number written down, you can contact Paul by going to weekendappointment.com, checking friends of the show, and get his contact information there. And Paul, I'm going to get some more information from you to update that because I want you to put a little more data up there and maybe some other useful information. But I'll get back with you on that. In the meantime, though, your contact information is up. But the other thing, I guess, what I want to let people know is, you don't always have to start with a bankruptcy lawyer to stay in your house when you're behind on your mortgage. And if you can't stay in your house, there are ways to get out of it gracefully that aren't going to hurt your credit as bad. And I guess those are the kinds of things you work on.
Exactly. What I try to do is minimize the damage. Again, if we can keep somebody in their house, that's great. Unfortunately, by the time most people call, it's too late, and then it simply becomes, how can we get them out of a bad situation as painless as possible?
Okay. So I guess if somebody's behind on their mortgage payments and maybe more than a month or two behind, that's probably time to get hold of somebody like you. Not when they're 9 months, but not that they can't get hold of you then. I mean, in other words, they should still. But if you're going, should I do something? Might I need to do something? That's probably the best time to have some preliminary discussions.
Actually, the best time is if you know that you're not going to be able to make next month's or even this month's mortgage payments.
Okay.
The best time to head off a problem is before it becomes a problem. Unfortunately, most people, what I'm seeing a lot of is, or people are just starting to wake up to the idea that they may not be able to find a new job right away. Or what I see as a bigger travesty is that people are buying into this whole notion of mortgage modifications, and the banks keep promising that foreclosure is not going to happen as long as people are working through the mortgage modification process.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I had $1 for every person that went through that. And then 2 weeks later, the sheriff shows up at their door and tells them that they're going to be foreclosed on.
That's.
He was talking with a guy up in Lebanon County. By the time he called me, he'd been through the mortgage modification process 3 times, and by the time he called me, he was 2 weeks away from sheriff's sale.
And once we get past, once the sheriff's sale happens, then we're kind of really behind the 8 ball, I would imagine.
Pennsylvania does not have a redemption period, so unless you can pull some finagling and some legal magic, once the sheriff's sale happens, it's over.
Right. Interesting. Huh. Now, I get what should I do? I mean, if I'm going to come see you or contact you, what kind of stuff should I be getting together?
What we're going to need is a couple of months' worth of bank statements, paycheck stubs if you're getting a paycheck, or some kind of information about what income is coming in, and really just a lot of the same stuff that you would need in looking at bankruptcy, seeing what your debts are, what your income is, and what your monthly expenses are. Because we have to show the bank why you're in the situation that you're in.
Right. So the next question I have for you is, because I'm sure some people are going, what is this short sale you're talking about? What is it exactly, just so people understand?
A short sale is where a property is sold for less than what's owed. So if somebody has a mortgage that, say, has a balance of $200,000 on it, then the market value of the property in its as-is condition is $180,000, we can still get that property sold. And most cases, 99% of the time, they won't have to bring a check to settlement to make up the difference.
Right.
So it's a relatively quick, painless way and very graceful way to get out of being deficient, behind on your mortgage, without affecting your credit any more than it already is. What a lot of people don't understand is that if a property goes to foreclosure and the sheriff sells it, it's going to be anywhere from 7 to 10 years before their grandmother will loan them lunch money. Where if I can get it sold before the sheriff does, they could be in a position to buy another house in as little as 3 years.
Right.
So that's the big message I'd like to see people get, is that there are ways. Just because you can't make your mortgage payment, there's still a way that you can protect yourself, protect your credit, and life goes on.
Right. Interesting. And then the other thing, I guess, is the trick is getting somebody to agree to the short sale. I mean, that's probably where you come in.
That's a lot where I come in, and that's where the real skill comes in being able to show the bank why it's as a lender, why it's in their best interest to accept less than what goes on, or what is owed on that note, and to point out that yes, it's true they're not making money, but to be able to show them why it's in their benefit to cut their losses now. Most foreclosures are costing the banks anywhere $40,000 to $50,000, sometimes more than that. So, there's no reason that a bank needs to spend that kind of money to protect a non-performing loan.
Right. So that's interesting. So basically, when people go, "Oh, I'm just gonna, go to the bank and tell them to take the property back," a lot of times the bank's going to say, "No, we're going to foreclose on it because." Well, I guess one of the things, if they do foreclose on you, is they're going to get the money that's owed on it, and potentially a judgment for the amount that is owed above what the house is worth.
Exactly, and there's also tax implications to that. One of the big things that, as far as doing, just mailing, I heard somebody call it jingle mail, where they just simply mail the keys back in and walk away from the property, is that they could still be on the hook for deficiency judgment, so there's still pending legal action, and the that's what they call a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Doing that affects your credit the same way that a foreclosure does. All you're doing is you're making life a lot easier for the bank, but you're not helping yourself out at all.
Interesting.
So before somebody does that, I'd rather have them sit down with you or I. And I've actually ran across people where a bankruptcy made sense, and I think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we can still sell a house even if it's in bankruptcy.
Correct. I mean, there just has to be some planning there and approval of all the necessary parties, etc. But yeah, a lot of times that's a good goal. Plus, if somebody still ends up in a bankruptcy after they've had a short sale, it can potentially reduce the amount of unsecured debt that's floating around, which would be the surplus debt above the secured debt of the property. So yeah, it certainly can streamline the bankruptcy process as well.
So, I think it's really good if somebody's having, if a homeowner is behind in their mortgage or they can see the handwriting on the wall, where they get a really good bankruptcy attorney and a realtor who knows what's going on, who knows how to work with the banks, and can state their case to the lender in the best possible scenario so that they can get out of this fairly unscathed and at very little cost to the homeowner.
Very, very interesting. Listen, I got to go to break here. Can you hang with us for the next segment, Paul?
Be happy to.
All right, hold on. You're listening to Weekend Appointment. This is attorney Carl Rominger. Go to weekendappointment.com to find Paul's information. We'll come back from the break. I'll also have him give him his phone number again. I'll see you in a minute. Hey, this is Carl Rominger. You're listening to Weekend Appointment. I'm joined again by Paul Chase, our foreclosure slash keep your house expert, who's also a realtor who does short sales, and you do all kinds of other real estate as well, Paul, I assume. If I just want to list a brand new spanking house with you, or I need to buy a house, you could help me with that as well.
If you twisted my arm, I could probably see my way clear to it, yes.
Listen, Matt, real quick, where are people going to get a hold of you again? I mean, how do they get a hold of you?
They can give me a call at the office. The office number is 717-735-8400, or they can go to my website, which is parealestateresources.com.
Okay. Well, I guess I would encourage people to do that. And what else do I want to know from you? I guess I'm really curious to find out, I mean, what kind of income bracket are we talking about, or for folks that you're doing this kind of stuff for? Is this like just sort of like lower middle class, upper middle class, across the board?
There is, it's across the board. Was in an appointment earlier today with some folks that they both recently lost their jobs. She had some medical issues, so and they've got about a $250,000 house. I've got another appointment coming up later this afternoon, and we're looking at about a $100,000 house. So this spans people that are in all income brackets and all stations in life. There really is no such thing as a stereotypical distressed property.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing on the other side is, somebody's looking to get a deal on some property. There are some great deals out there. I saw that Fannie Mae is looking to raise their fee on new home loans in this April, and that's going to affect a borrower's potential. So if anybody's looking to buy a home, yes, you still have to do your homework. You still have to have a property inspected. I always recommend that. But for somebody looking to buy a house this spring, now's a great time to get into the market, get pre-approved with a lender, and be able to maximize your buying potential.
So I want to go back to this just a little bit so I make sure I understand it right. Basically, the idea is get this stuff nailed down and get this house on the market and get the lender all set, because that's going to be the biggest hurdle.
Exactly. The lenders right now are absolutely swamped. Was listening to an interview with an executive from Bank of America, and this tidal wave of foreclosures that we're seeing happen caught all the major lenders off guard, and the processes weren't not in place to handle that. I know at one time, I think it was Wells Fargo had 100 people in their loss mitigation department, and they were responsible for everything in the country. Now they have over 1,000 people in there, and they're responsible just for the East Coast. So the banks are being swamped. So the sooner we get the process started, the sooner we can help somebody get out of this, and the easier it's going to be to deal with the banks to get whatever the solution is approved, whether it be working out a loan modification or possibly, more than likely selling the house and getting them out from underneath that oppressive debt.
And I know, so I get involved sometimes in these occasions for the sale of these short sales in terms of reviewing the legal documents and the agreements, et cetera, the HUD-1s. But you're right. I think the biggest hurdle is the banks because there's no you can't, it's not like 1951 where you drove downtown to the local bank, went in to see the loan officer, and he said, well, the committee met last night and we've decided to let you do a short sale because that's not who you're dealing with. You're dealing with large lenders with dozens and dozens and dozens of offices, left hand's not knowing what the right hand's doing all the time, that sort of thing. And I guess I agree with you that the biggest issue has to be making sure that you get to the lender early and make sure you find the person who actually has authority.
Right. Well, the big thing is, like Bank of America has 25% of the mortgage market or services 25% of the residential mortgages that are out there. But that doesn't mean that Bank of America owns the note that wasn't Bank of America's money that was used to buy the house. Very often they're just the servicer. So they're the face and the voice of the investor who's behind them, and we may have to go through 3 levels of bureaucracy to get to that investor or to get that investor to make a decision. And that's usually what takes so much time.
So I guess if we come back to don't wait till the end of the rope, so to speak, or when you've actually been sued and the sheriff's sale's ongoing. I mean, if you're down the road, have you been successful at sort of stalling things or getting to people and saying, okay, guys, let's hold off on foreclosing while we try to work out this short sale?
We can. The biggest thing there is just because a property's listed, most of the banks won't stop the sheriff's sale. But a lot of them will stop the sheriff's sale if a property is under agreement and buyer and seller have come together and we're just waiting for the bank's approval. The banks understand that this is a long, drawn-out process, or that it can be, and very often they're willing to stop the sheriff's sale simply because it's in their best interest to do that. Again, if they take control of the property, they're responsible for it, and the banks are not in the business of owning real estate.
Right.
So if we can get a house on the market, if that's what we have to do, get it on the market, get a buyer identified, and get it under contract, very often we can delay a sheriff's sale. And depending on which county the property's in, sometimes we can get it delayed 2 months, sometimes as many as 4 months. It just depends on the county and what the bank's position is.
Okay, so there's and again I keep saying this, but there's a lot that you do and value that you can add to the equation that's kind of unique in the sense that you're kind of the go-between who knows, who to call, how to do it, and that's kind of what somebody's getting you for.
Exactly. And the really cool thing is most of the time my services are free to the homeowner. The bank pays my fees. So, yeah, there's a lot that I do behind the scenes that a homeowner never sees, but it still goes on. And what I think makes me particularly unique is I'm one of the few people that saw this trend in mortgages coming long before the banks did, and I've been extensively trained by some of the best people in the country. And I'm one of the few people in South Central PA that are certified to train other realtors on how to stop foreclosures.
Interesting.
So I think that's a lot of expertise there at no cost to most homeowners.
Paul, again, I think it's worthwhile to let people know how to get a hold of you because obviously with that level of training and skill, I guess I could go to some of your students or proteges, but if somebody wanted to go right to the teacher, how do they get hold of you?
I can be reached at 717-735-8400, or I've got a bunch of free information for homeowners at www.parealestateresources.com.
Yeah, very nice. What else do I want to ask you? I think that's pretty much it. I mean, what else do we need to cover? Anything you can think of?
Well, maybe you can tell me how bankruptcy comes into play. Can we, if somebody's got a lot of debt, a lot of credit cards, it could make my job easier if you could make that debt go away through a bankruptcy. Is that possible?
It is possible, although here's the problem. Secured creditors go first, right? And so if there's a mortgage, generally speaking, they're first in line to get anything out of the estate and bankruptcy estate, and that would include the value of the property. So even in the bankruptcy, you're going to have some agreement with the creditor. And here's the answer. Remember what you said earlier, banks are not in the business of owning property. So as a secured creditor and first in line, they may be willing to sign off on the sale of their asset to a third party for partial satisfaction. And if the sale doesn't generate is commercially reasonable and doesn't generate sufficient income to get above, because again we're calling it a short sale, above the true value of the property or the bank loan or equity that's out, or I shouldn't say the loan that's out there isn't going to be fully satisfied, then it's really not affecting or hurting the unsecured creditors, right? Because they weren't going to get any money anyhow out of that asset. So, right. But I think you and I've talked about this once before, that the rub comes in on somebody who's subordinate in line, which is the second mortgage. Those folks are the ones who are most likely to cry foul on a short sale.
Right, and very often, I mean, if the junior lien holder's got a $10,000 or $15,000 second note, they're going to be doing good if they get $2,500 or maybe on a good day $3,000. Yeah,
they quite often in a bankruptcy are in danger of ending up in the unsecured creditors pile. So they may be willing to take a small amount as well to go away. But then again, you got to get the senior debt holder to agree as well.
Right. So, it's one of those deals where every situation's unique, and it's just a matter of having somebody who knows what they're looking at a homeowner's position, and then working with the homeowner, and then having, for instance, you and I sit down and say, okay, here's the situation. What can we do?
Right. Paul, let me do this. I've got to wrap up the show for this week. Give everybody your phone number one more time, and then I got to sign out.
Okay. Telephone number is 717-735-8400, or my website with all kinds of free resources is www.parealestateresources.com.
Hey, Paul, thanks for joining me. Take care, brother.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Carl Rominger here, signing out. Weekend appointment. Come back next week. Listen to us at the same time. In the meantime, go to www.weekendappointment.com, post your legal questions, or get my contact information. We're happy to serve you. We've got offices throughout the mid-state, and if we don't know how to do it, we know someone who does. Talk to you later.